My name is Monica Wilkinson Kelly. I'm the archivist at the Edith B. Ford Memorial Library in Ovid, New York. This interview is being conducted as part of the Cayuga and Seneca Lakes Agriculture and Craft Beverage Memory Project. Today is November 5th, 2020. I'm interviewing Joe Myer of Myer Farm Distillery. Good morning, Joe.
Hi, good morning.
Can you tell me your full name and where you are located currently?
Sure, my name's Joseph E. Myer. We're in Ovid, New York on Route 89. It's what the oldest wine trail in New York State is. Cayuga Wine Trail is based along this boulevard down here. We're in Seneca County. I happen to live right next door, my great-grandparents' house, and the distillery sits on what's been our family farm of 5 generations.
Wow. So what is your background in particular, educational background, where you were born and raised as well?
Yep, I was born and raised half a mile from here. I'm born in Ithaca, New York, but my parents raised me and 7, 8 siblings a half mile from here, north of here. My background's quite varied, as I think you may know. Everyone's, I think, different who gets into a beverage industry, whether it's wine or spirits. And my background, I come from a musical family. My mother's 95 and she still has piano students. So we all had to learn the piano and plus another instrument. And so I started out in violin and piano. Actually have a bachelor's degree in violin and piano performance. My dad was a dairy farmer, so as soon as I graduated, I had missed the cows so bad for so long because he had sold them when I was 13, that when farming's kind of in your blood, I think. And so I just had to go work with cows. So after a bachelor's degree in music, I worked with Doc Mailing in Interlaken and was a assistant herdsman there for about 10 years off and on. And I started my own brood cow and stud bull Holstein business. So I had a little business experience there, the farming background. Of course, I worked all growing up as a kid on the farm. But then also I got a master's degree in writing and poetry. And I was a fine arts painter for about 15 years. So I think, you know, our parents, especially my mother, instilled in us, all us kids, how important it was to develop your talents. And I just, you know, artists, professionals that I knew were like, you got to choose one thing. You can't just try to do them all. And it's like, well, I know I still have more to develop here and there. And so I was just honoring what I felt was given to me or nurtured in me. So I kept all those arts being developed and working in them. And about 2009, I guess, 2009, John, who's my oldest brother, who took over the family farm from my dad in the early 80s, he and I got talking, and I kind of wanted a big project and get back to working in the farm industry, ag industry, and working on this farm in particular. And so we talked about potential projects, one being, say, winery. You know, the wine industry has been a little saturated at that point, and I'm a very hands-on, being a you know, artist by training. I like a lot of control over what I'm doing when I'm trying to create and produce. And I felt like wineries are very labor intensive, and I didn't want that kind of big labor force. I wanted to have as much control on what I was doing as possible. So we kind of ditched that idea, and independently of each other, we attended distilling conferences. So I attended one in 2010 that Cornell puts on at the Extension in Geneva. It was a fermentation workshop and a distilling workshop, 3-day event. And when I finished up with that, something inside of me was like, you must do this. It was a real calling, you see. And I was scared, but also confident, because when you feel like you hear a voice saying you have to do that, then if you have some kind of perspective that involves a universe that's bigger than you, then you kind of listen to that. So John and I talked and realized we both attended distilling conferences, and we're like, oh, I guess this is what we should do.
Wow.
So yeah, we started our business entities in 2010 and started the building in 2011. This was an old cow pasture. So we worked with an architect and a close friend of ours who was my assistant distiller starting out. Is highly experienced construction carpenter and construction manager. So we built this building here, and we started production in June of 2012, about the first week of June, and opened our tasting room, I think it was October 5th of that year, 2012. So this is our 8th year of production and being open.
Wow. And I know, so your brother grows many of the grains that are used in the production of your spirits.
Yep. So we're an estate distillery, which there are a few in the country, I think. John works about, I think, 900 acres this year. Sometimes it's 1,000, sometimes it's a little less than what he's doing this year, and a wide variety of crops. So soybeans are big, corn, varieties of wheat, rye, barley. Some years he's done red kidney beans, for example. But the only grains I use in the products are what he grows right on site. So you kind of get, a taste of what's coming out of this environment, this ecosystem.
Wow, that's great. I know, going back a bit, your family, the first family member arrived here May 1789, I read. So I think the first person to actually farm between the lakes. So that is something to be really proud of. Your roots are really, really strong here.
They're very deep, yeah. Yeah, so on multiple lines in our family, we're settlers of Ovid, and in fact, the first settlers, my direct ancestor Joseph Wilson and his brother-in-law Andrew Dunlap, had the first distilleries here, and I think our Joseph Wilson ended up moving and having his distillery set up in Watkins Glen, but it's so deep. And like I mentioned earlier, there's something about farming. I don't know where you draw the line. I'm not a scientist in that regard. But whether it's the rhythms of, getting up to milk the cows, or you're tied to the weather because, all your decisions are, and the outcomes of your efforts growing and harvesting, they're all dependent on the weather and environment. So it's intertwined, and I think over generations that's concentrated in your blood.
So you have you opened in 2012, I think you said.
Yeah.
And so what was the quantity produced the first year?
Well, we had a few different products, maybe 3 or 4 out the gate, and I think we bottled about 700 cases of spirits first full year, and moved up from there. And in the past few years, I think the most I've bottled is 1,200, maybe 1,500 a year, but we're around 1,000 a year cases.
And is everything bottled here as well?
Yes, everything's done here. In fact, since 2017, I do the bulk of the production myself. I have staff that helps with sealing and labeling, but all the mashing and cooking and distilling, besides running the whole business, I do myself. So,
wow. Can you describe what a day is like for you when you get to work?
Yeah, well, there's always the book work and business work. I start early, and there's always stuff when you're a business owner. Your mind's constantly, it's intertwined with your life. So there's, the short-term issues and problems you've got to think about and solve, and scheduling and timing, and the longer-term issues. So, And then when I'm actually doing production weeks, I don't do them every week, but I plan out when I've got to make mash. So basically, just to give a quick overview of distilling as part of this, we make mill grain and make a beer much like brewers do. And so that's 8 to 10 day project for a few days a week, and then that has to ferment. I ferment about a week, and so after that mash is, we call it wort at this point, it's fermented for a week. Then you've got a beer or wash that's about 8 to 10% alcohol, and then we take that and run it through the still. The first run through of still is called low wines, and ours are about 80 proof, 40% alcohol. And then depending on what you're making finally as a final product, you run it more times through the still. So, my normal schedule is I've got cook week, and then the following week I've got stripping weeks, and those, because I do 2 cooks per day, then the following week I've got 2 strips per day. And that's going to be, 12-hour day, several days in a row. And then final runs, each strip is going to be about 5 hours. So that's another 12-hour day. So I have a lot of packs of 12-hour days. And then I have some days where I'm not doing that, but I've got other work, bottling and business work to do.
And can you talk about your product line a bit?
Sure. So as I said, when we first opened in 2012, we just had a handful. I think we had vodka and an unaged corn whiskey and a wheat spirit. But we now have 22 products. Most of them are in 2 sizes, 750 ml and 375. We've got Myer Farm vodka is our standard vodka made from wheat. Then we have naturally infused flavored vodkas. So we've got a coffee vodka, a ginger vodka, lavender vodka, blueberry vodka, orange vodka, blueberry orange, I should say. And, we use local and organic where possible ingredients. So for example, our ginger vodka, we use organic ginger root from the Good Life Farm. They have the cider house down the road. Coffee isn't grown locally, but it is procured and roasted by Gimme Coffee out of Trumansburg. Shade grown, farm owned and traceable coffee. Our most popular product is Myer Farm Gin. And our gin's a little different. It's the juniper's more in the background, or you might say more integrated. So it's not overly piney, but it's very popular. And we have a Cayuga Gold barrel gin named after Cayuga Lake. And that is our gin aged for 2 years in once-used whiskey barrels. And then briefly, we also have standard whiskeys, a bourbon, a rye, wheat whiskey, a 4-grain whiskey, and then we have straight single barrel versions of each of those. Then I also have 3 naturally infused whiskeys, so a cinnamon whiskey, a honey whiskey, and ginger rye whiskey. And then finally, named after our grandmother Susie, who lived next door, Electa Fig Liqueur, which is figs, 60 pounds of figs soaked in a barrel of Cayuga Gold aged gin. That one won a platinum medal. So, and both the gin and the Cayuga Gold barrel gin have won gold medals and double gold for the Cayuga Gold.
Oh, that's great. So, as far as technology, was it a big startup investment to buy can you talk about your equipment a little?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think our startup cash, you need a lot of cash to start a business. So, initially I did a lot of research. My brother did a lot of research, and we got our still from the Carl company. It's the oldest still manufacturer in Germany. One of the family members and the rep for Carl works with Cornell. And so I got to meet them and get to know them at the workshop I had. So, developing a relationship helped, with that. And then our cook tanks and other equipment, I bought at auction. There was a dispersal up near Lake Ontario, and but equipment's expensive, and then of course with spirits, especially whiskey, you've got a long-term investment, right? You need that. The barrels are expensive, and then you're not getting. That's got to sit there for some time before you can sell it. So you're investing a lot heavily at the beginning before you can make sales on certain things. And then when you have staff and insurance needs, you know, it takes a lot of investment and capital to get going.
Have there been any incentives in New York State that have helped the industry
I know there have.
that you've taken advantage of at all?
Well, we personally haven't in those precise incentives. The Distillers Guild, of which we're a member, they have taken advantage of them. So we as a collective group have used them for marketing and other purposes. But the state certainly has provided the industry great support, you know, recognizing the economic value of the beverage industry. So the governor has, you know, through time has increasingly shown, and the legislature support. For example, I forget the year now, but at some point, initially we were only allowed to do samples. The liquor authority can only pour samples, but then we were allowed to start selling cocktails, serving and selling cocktails, which helps people have a context for the various products.
Right.
And so that was a significant help. And there have been other, you know, legislative and tax-related things that have helped.
Right, so it's, to some degree, it's a continuation of the Farm Winery Act
Yeah,
from
yeah, I think it
1976.
is.
It's just been added to and added to cideries,
Yeah,
breweries, distilleries.
yeah. And then you'll probably get to this later about the current epidemic. There's been, you know, great help there too. Just extending various options, ways of generating income through these difficult times.
And how have you dealt with that? What sort of changes did you have to make to accommodate visitors during COVID?
It's been very difficult. We, you know, initially we had the state shutdown that everyone experienced. But one of the ways in which the state was showing support as spirits, distilleries, tasting rooms, initially we could only sell direct. Our liquor licenses to retail customers have to come in the door physically to buy their product. And, you know, wineries were always able to ship direct to retail customers, but we were not. So currently, since the epidemic started and it's monthly, been extended by the month, I think, is we're allowed to ship direct to customers in New York State. So that's helped quite a bit. And then when tasting allowances and service, liquor service was allowed, you know, we worked through that a lot, looking over the benefits, pros and cons, and we never reopened our tasting room or cocktail service. So it's been difficult because some people really want it, but to meet both the state requirements, but also the logistical demands to make that happen, didn't feel like that was viable for us. So, you know, staff has been at a minimum, and we've kept our hours limited, and we don't do the cocktail service. So we'll see what spring fares. It's, you know, winter's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. And how many people do you normally employ?
Normally we have
full-time or
between 5 and 7 people, usually one to 2 FTEs, full-time equivalents, and some other extra part-time help. You know, in a non-epidemic year, I usually hope that wasn't a hit. Usually increase our staff support, a couple part-timers extra from March or April through October, because we really see visitor populations increase through those months. But so far, I've been able to keep staff as we've worked things out. I try to make sure everyone's happy and have the hours they need. But it's been a slimmer range of hours and offerings.
So you work closely with your brother, who grows all of the grains for the products. What do you see as the greatest natural threat to the industry, to the agriculture? What has been one of the greatest challenges? I know there are mildew people have talked about.
Yeah, John would be the best person to ask about that. I think, being an organic farm, the soil is, literally sustainable. So you get for example, the more organic matter you have, nitrogen and composting, people are used to knowing about compost with home gardens. That organic matter, broken up leaves or tilled in clover, that holds water better and it provides a better environment for your plants to grow. So if you have an organic farm, your soils are going to be much healthier during times of stress. So, we always have periods of drought or flooding or heavy rain, but I think with the changing climate, we're seeing more extremes of that. We were in the national news 2 springs ago. We had this area, literally, Lodi Point and Sheldrake Point. I think we saw 12 inches of rain in less than an hour. Right. And one of John's fields that he works was washed out, and so much stone and literally boulders from the side of the road have washed in there. He's not been able to use that field. So
how big of a field? I think it was August 2018 when, and yet one winery right next to where the flooding happened was
it's fine.
unscathed.
Yeah, it's very location specific. That field in particular, I don't think was a huge field. But those are the kinds of things that extreme weather and climate affects. And your droughts get longer and more marked, and if you're heavier rain periods, managing weed control or the health of your crops is more of a challenge. So.
I know grape growers have mentioned hail in particular.
Oh yeah, and fruit farmers, it's just horrible.
Right, and no control, just great year and then suddenly
it's gone
in an instant. It's gone. Yeah. So so what do you think has been one of your greatest achievements in the industry?
Well, there are a lot of industry members who, I know a few who, really work well socially and politically and help, say, for example, in the Distillers Guild, who certainly have made tremendous achievements for all of us. I have nothing that I can say that I've done in that manner. So I guess I could say that the way I approach making spirits, to me, it's making art. So as a, mostly former poet, painter, and musician, all my intuitions and training and skill is conceiving of things, having a vision, and using material and finding a way to manifest that. And so in thinking about spirits as art, literally, I think about composition and proportion and light and dark and balance. You might even think in terms of music of bass line and harmony and melody and how all those factors play together. So when the spirit's coming off the still, especially say when I'm making a whiskey, the flavor profile that comes across, it's my new medium, I guess you could say. So instead of using paint and color or pitches and notes, it's the spirit. And it's been so satisfying because, one, it all starts right here on this land between these lakes. And my brother, he just grows all these grains and nurtures them and harvests them. And then I use them in another step to make these spirits. So to me, it's not just production of a material or a new food item. It's not just production of beverage. It's art. So like Myer Farm Gin, that's my pride and joy, I think. and the Cayuga gold, it's think of it as a liquid painting, right? So that's what I'm most proud of, and hopefully that's an achievement that has some long-lasting impact.
Oh, that's wonderful. It must be difficult to strike a balance between your calling and how you interpret the medium, if we call it a medium, and public taste, because that seems to change constantly, and fads, what's popular, and
That's true.
from year to year. So it must be a difficult balance to strike.
Yeah, I get a lot of requests for certain things, so and I'm always always thinking and considering things and weighing things. So for example, I knew at a certain point when I wanted to make another flavored vodka, so I'd solicit ideas and people would have them or just mention them, and lavender was a big one. People are like, oh, what about a lavender? And it's like, oh yeah, that's one I'd always thought of. And then I think about the materials that go into it. And so for the lavender, I have a friend who's an industry member, Root Clear over in Lodi, is a chocolatier and has a lavender farm. And I know that kind of is something I can replicate and make consistent. And I love lavender. So that's something that we're getting interest from the public, sort of aligned with what I wanted to do. And but a lot of it, I follow my instincts and thoughts and then see if it's marketable, think about it, and throw it off people for feedback.
Well, what would you tell anybody interested in opening a distillery? What would you suggest?
Come join us. Yeah, no, I think, even winery, there's always room. I mean, saturation points maybe for certain regions, but there's always a niche you can carve out for yourself, like certain types of products that other people aren't making. There's lots of them out there. And, follow your passion, follow your heart and intuition, and find you got to have a good relationship with other people you might want to found something with and work with. You got to be able to communicate. Communication is vital. You got to have a good source of capital, so whether savings or financial resources, institutions that can help, but there's room and space for newcomers, and do your research and planning, and it probably helps to be passionate about something in particular. So you might want to be in the beverage industry but not really knowing where to fit. Try working on a winery or at a distillery or working on a farm, or because I think everyone has passions, even if you're not yet aware of them. You could be passionate about something, and we all have kernels of talent in us. So I think, people can find and match their talent and to a passion and find a way to manifest it around here. So.
Oh, terrific. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Is there anything we left out in conversation?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure.
This is Joe Myer of Myer Farm Distillery in Ovid, New York.
Where the milkweed flies.
Where the milkweed is flying.
So we keep the milkweed in this fallow pure part for the monarchs. I was telling you earlier, we have, in the fall, we just have mobs of monarchs along the copse of trees there. So.
No, I think I read it suggested that one does plant milkweed to induce
monarchs. Yeah, I think it's part of their life cycle to use the plant. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. You do so much with the land and organic farming and your long history of farming. I didn't get to ask how many acres you currently own or your brother owns, but you have such a long history in agriculture in Seneca County, and I thank you so much for your contribution and your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.